Good evening. We're back with Deep Images, and we're still talking about demons, devils, and black magic in our Halloween horror series. Uh, I've got with me Chris Gilpin, Justin Cotton, Keith Howell, C.F. Roberts, Bill Mulligan, and Rhiannon Clark. That's kind of sort of clockwise from my position. Uh, Justin's going to lead us off tonight with a movie that a few people watching might have heard of. I don't know.
Yes, thank you. I had heard of it many times, but never actually watched this film. It's a 1968 film called Rosemary's Baby. I watched it for the first time yesterday. Fortunately, not at the cinema, but next best thing on the laptop. It's directed by Roman Polanski, who's fairly notorious for allegedly fairly um, strange occurrence, which has seen him still in exile, I think, in Europe. Um, but nevertheless, this film I think was very bold for its time, very edgy, prepared to push the envelope, and I that's the best thing I think about this film is its courage and its boldness. Um, so I think it's the only film I've seen of that I know offhand is from or was directed by Roman Polanski. It's based on a novel and set in. I think it's helped by its setting, which I'm very fond of the city of New York, Manhattan, and the fact that it's set in near Central Park, I think, is adds a lot to the film in terms of its atmospherics. It's set in this building called the Bramford, which I think is actually in a real building called the Dakota in Upper West Side, New Manhattan.
Hmm.
So it's a big old ornate building. Looks as though it's constructed in around the 1880s or so. Apparently, the Bramford has a dark history. So the film starts with this young couple, the Woodhouses, Rosemary Woodhouse, played by Mia Farrow, and her husband Guy Woodhouse, who's a stage actor struggling for work beyond doing Yamaha commercials, um, played by John Cassavetes. They're both very good, actually, in their respective roles. Um, and they're shown through the apartment. Curiously, there's a very heavy chest of drawers, very large, heavy chest of drawers that's moved in front of a closet or linen closet. And a guy and the agent, with some effort, move it away, and they're wondering why the closet has been blocked off by the previous tenant, who was an elderly lady who died in somewhat mysterious circumstances. Um, so Rosemary and Guy's friend, an elderly British gentleman by the name of Hutch. Um, so he tells them about the history of the Bramford and that there was apparently some kind of witches cult in the 1890s, headed by a man called Adrian, and it was rumored that there had been experiments done involving the deaths of children. And as a result, this person, Adrian, back in the 1890s, was killed by an angry mob, either in the lobby of the building or just outside the building.
Adrian Mercado.
Um, Adrian Mercado, yes. And then the place was empty up until about the 1920s, and then there was in the 1950s there was another incident where a dead baby, was found in the basement. Um, Despite these this history, they move in, and they in one of the early scenes, Rosemary meets a young woman called Terry in the laundry room down in the basement. Um, Terry lives with this elderly couple called the Castevets, Minnie and Roman
Castanets.
Castevet, who are the neighbours on the same level as Guy and Rosemary. And she explains Terry that she's a recovering drug addict and has been taken in by the Castevets and assisted. And she shows Rosemary this pendant on a necklace that she has. It has a strange odor coming from the pendant, uh, which is said to be tennis root, which Rosemary had certainly not heard of, but it's said to be a lucky charm in any case. And in the very next scene, Rosemary and Guy are coming home at night, and there's police crowded around outside the building, and somebody has thrown themselves off the building, committed suicide. And when they're shocked to see, well, particularly Rosemary's shocked to see it's this young lady Terry, who has thrown herself off the building from apparently the Castevet's apartment, which is on the same level as Rosemary and Guy's apartment. They then meet for the first time this elderly couple, Roman and Minnie Castevet, who are coming home as well, and they express shock and dismay at what's occurred. Um, and then it just develops from there. They end up befriending the Castevets, somewhat reluctantly at first. The Castevets um, invite Rosemary and Guy to dinner. Um, Rosemary at first finds them meddlesome, and Guy was reluctant to go there, but eventually seems to become friendly with Roman Castevet,
It's
and he
Castanet.
invites
I have to correct you
Castevet.
because the spelling of their names is crucial to the plot, if you remember.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it had a V in it, but
No,
maybe I'm
you're
wrong. But anyway,
confusing it with the actor who's in it, Cassavetes.
So it's
Castevetes.
castanet, like a.
It's Roman Castanet. Yeah, Roman Castanet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I might have looked it up on
I wouldn't
Wikipedia.
I wouldn't even
But
mention it, but it is actually key
yeah,
to the climax of the whole
yeah, yeah,
story.
yeah. That's right. Yeah. So anyway, so despite Rosemary finding them a little bit meddlesome, and certainly Minnie Castanet is a very annoying sort of character.
Yeah.
She's very loud and she's very bolshy and gets in your face. I mean, she seems to be helpful, of course, but maybe as Rosemary says later in the film, if anything, overly helpful. And in the meantime, Guy is going having these chats with Roman. But Rosemary doesn't want to go, but so on and so forth. Um, there's a scene where they're trying to have a baby, and Minnie brings in these chocolate mousses and then leaves, and it breaks up their romantic dinner. But Rosemary's eating this chocolate mousse, and she goes, "Oh, it's got a strange undertaste, like a chalky undertaste." And
Oh no.
and guy sort of chides her and says, "Oh, it's fine. Either eat it or you don't," sort of thing. Next thing you know, Rosemary sort of she pretends to eat some of it, but then throws the rest away when Guy's not looking. Oldest trick in the book. But then next thing you know, she's stumbling around the apartment and goes into a bit of a stupor. And then there's this sort of strange hallucinatory episode where she imagines she's on a boat, um, and she's naked, and there's other naked woman there, and Guy, and she's on a bed. She's on her bed, but she imagines she's on a bed on this boat. Um, and then she's imagining that her feet and arms are being tied to the bed, and there's people that she doesn't know standing around the bed. And she sees this face with red eyes coming towards her. So
Oh no.
the next morning, she's told she slept a long time, and Guy says, "Look, I'm sorry, I didn't want to miss baby night," and he's kind of helped himself anyway while she was unconscious, which is pretty shocking to me because that's effectively, obviously, a rape
Well,
within the
he's a
marriage.
pig. I mean, if you really his
He's a
behavior
pig of
toward
a
her would
character.
be considered
Yeah,
really gauche nowadays. I mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, that just it's in modern sensibilities, and I think rightly, that's kind of a shocking turn of events in the film.
yeah.
But anyway, it turns out, of course, later on, as you understand, it wasn't Guy at all. She's got these scratches on her body, and Guy says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've now filed my fingernails," which is obviously very fairly odd in itself. But the idea is that she's actually been raped by a demon, and hence and she wasn't sure at the time whether it's a dream or not. But towards the end of her hallucination episode, she's screaming out, "This is no dream! This is no dream!" And then she wakes up the
What?
next
That's
morning.
an incredible scene.
Yeah, but she sees these red eyes and this sort of red face, evil-looking face, and I suppose that is the demon that she's seen in her dream, but may have been summoned, as it turned out, by the satanic cult, which is, as you'll see in the film, is the key behind the whole plot. Um, and as you can probably guess, the head of the satanic cult are Mr. and Mrs. Castevet, the neighbours. Um, in the meantime, I don't want to go through all the plot inch by inch, but Hutch, their friendly British neighbour, uh, he comes along and to speak to Rosemary. In the meantime, Rosemary has fallen pregnant, but somehow the Castevets, with the assistance of her husband Guy, managed to persuade her to go to a different obstetrician rather than the usual doctor, or the doctor she intended to go to was a Dr. Hill. Instead, they say you should go and see a Dr. Abraham Saperstein. And he basically, as it turns out,
He's
he
a slimy character.
yeah, oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
awful. he discourages Rosemary away from using traditional medicines and instead using the herb law of Minnie Castevet. She's got this organic garden adjacent to her apartment, and she mixes up various herb influenced drinks and so forth, which she then brings kindly along to Rosemary to consume. And of course, Saperstein knows the Castanets, and basically exhorts the wisdom of using Minnie's herb assistance. Um, so it moves on, and Hutch comes along and visits Rosemary, and he says, "I'm sorry to hear you've been experiencing some stomach pains and so forth." But seems a bit suspicious about this tannis root is independent that has been given to now given to Rosemary, and also as it turns out, Mister Caston also attends at the apartment at the same time and meets Hutch. You can sort of sense a tension between these two characters. Obviously, Hutch doesn't fully, even though he's meeting them for the first time, doesn't seem to fully trust the Castanets. And you can see Mr. Roman Castanet looking back at Hutch kind of, warily or suspiciously. And as he's leaving, the guy then gets home and Hutch says he's leaving, but he can't find one of his gloves. One of his gloves has gone missing from the linen closet. Anyway, so he says, "Oh, I must have left it somewhere else. I'll go and find it." But the next day, he gets in touch with an urgent call to Rosemary and says, "I want you to meet me outside this famous landmark building, which name escapes me. Um, and I've got something to tell you, but I don't want to tell you on the phone." But when she goes there the next day at 11 a.m. to meet Hutch, he doesn't show up. And she later finds when she rings for him that Hutch's friend says, just in the last 24 hours, he's become very ill and has gone into a coma. And he's in hospital. And eventually this character, Hutch, dies 3 months later. So
Justin,
you
I'll be
don't
right
see.
back. Continue. Everyone continue as
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no worries.
Mhm.
Um, but in the meantime, when at the time he does have the funeral, Rosemary goes and is told by Hutch's friend, "Oh, he made sure to say that he wanted you to have this book. There's a book in this envelope." And yeah, so she takes that home, and there's then clues as to the fact that Hutch has been researching witchcraft and the backstory of this building, um, and this leads her to make a connection between Roman Castanet and the original Satanist who was living there, Adrian Mercato, in the 1890s, and works out that in fact, and the ages and the time of birth and the age all marries up as well. That in fact Roman is the son of Adrian Mercato. So as the viewer, you kind of make the connections and you think, oh well, obviously this is an ongoing cult. It's sort of touched on in other films as well. So it's a bit of a trope where you have um, sort of a witch's coven or a satanic cult that has been going for generations, that's associated with one place, in this case, the Bramford. Um, so there's also themes in here which are quite interesting in terms of, women's liberation. I think was a big thing at the time. You're very sympathetic to Rosemary's character and the
Yeah.
fact that she's having these treatments foisted on her, a fairly unsympathetic husband who tries to be, at least on the surface, sympathetic. Meddlesome neighbours, and a doctor who's, in this case, Saperstein, who's taking a very paternalistic attitude towards her. So these kind of themes as
Are these, sorry,
Catholicism.
are these potions, Justin, are these potions to kind of like um help the sort of like demonic baby
Yeah,
along
they're to
to
keep her
help it?
doped up and to keep preparing her body to deliver yeah, you just said it.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
And
okay,
then I think it's
sorry.
it's good to call them potions rather than treatments because, in fact, it appears that for all intents and purposes, Minnie Castanet is actually a witch,
Oh yeah.
and she's using these herb uh, treatments, which are effectively potions, which is central to the theme. Um, so there's Catholicism in there as well because Rosemary comes from a large Catholic family. Um,
She's a
And
dark witch, though. She's a black witch, though. Just not to
oh
put
yeah,
a
certainly.
bad
Oh yeah,
name on a witch. There are
Oh
just some
no.
witches that give other witches bad names.
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
So
yes.
certainly.
It's
Yeah,
it
Many
definitely
and
blurs the line between witchcraft and Satanism in this
yes.
story.
For the audience, witchcraft is not Satanism. Satanism is not evil. Witchcraft is not evil. However, any of those things can be evil depending on how you use it. So
yeah.
that's
We'll say it's a black magic witch as opposed to a
yes,
white
they're in
magic
black
witch.
magic.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. They're using black magic. And
Okay.
they do worship
Um,
you know who.
and there's also the theme of paranoia as well, because Rosemary does
Voldemort.
become. Well,
Yeah.
thinking of Harry Potter, is it? Yeah, so sad news of Maggie Smith passing away too, as the Harry Potter
Oh,
reference I heard this morning.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Hmm.
getting back to the film,
God bless her.
yeah. So the paranoia, because Rosemary does obviously become paranoid with good reason, I would suggest, because she doesn't have, with Hutch having gone, she effectively has no other support she can trust. She comes to suspect Guy's involved in this, particularly after all his late night discussions with the Castanets, because she's started to see that the Castanets are not to be trusted. And it turns out her paranoia is actually well founded, and that Guy has actually been influenced by the Castanets. And the reason behind that was he was desperate, he was out of work. The Castanets have somehow, through black magic, um, managed to produce an outcome. I think it was because some artifact was given by this actor to Guy, and they use a personal artifact to make
Yeah.
that person
Yeah.
ill. So the other actor that was this big name actor became ill in that he became suddenly blind. And as a result, Guy gets his big break because he then can fill in the shoes of this actor. And he says, he keeps saying, we're going to make it big, Rosemary, with this new role. It's sad what happened, but we've got to take our break and we can move to California, et cetera, et cetera. So the
You
temptation.
mentioned feminism, and I just want to say, I mean, every time I've watched this movie, and more so over the years than less so, I get more and more frustrated as we move. As in my lifetime, I first saw the movie when I was about 10. We've moved over the whole era of women's liberation, equality, et cetera, and it's not perfect or anything, but uh this woman has no agency. I mean, she has to fight to advocate for herself. No one advocates for her. I'm using modern parlance for this situation. No one advocates for Rosemary at all, except Hutch for a minute, and then he's gone. And
Yeah,
it's really depressing. They've secluded her, and this really is kind of an allegory for a lot of abusive relationships. That guy
yeah,
is he cuts her off from all her friends. He cuts her off from a real doctor. He cuts her off from her best friend. And it's
Yeah, no, you're literally watching an entire cast gaslight this woman.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it's
That's awful.
paranoia, and I mean Polanski's movies are heavy in Polanski, both his upbringing as a victim of Nazi occupation and also being into Franz Kafka and stuff like that, is his stories are almost all from that period paranoid. Like no one believes the main character, the tenants like that, and the repulsions like that. The main character is cut off from everyone else. Either other people do it or their own mental state.
Mm.
And so it's like
there is
you have
there
to
is
Yeah.
a
watch
brief
in
exception. Yeah,
frustration.
yeah,
I
it's
have
frustrating.
experienced that
Yeah,
myself personally, and it's actually horrific. And to actually be to recover from such a an experience actually takes time, and you have to kind of cut away from all of these characters. So I mean, it plays upon a lot of these dark movies, and they play upon real things that actually really happen in real life. That's what makes them kind of
Oh
scary
yeah.
because actually they do happen.
Or what a modern Hollywood movie, Rosemary would have some kind of ally who would jump in at some point. But
yes.
this isn't.
Mhm.
This was made in '68. This is hitting toward the era of nihilism in film and in mainstream film, and no
That's
one
what's
jumps
good
in to
about it.
save
Yeah,
Rosemary.
yeah. It doesn't follow the 2024 Hollywood formula in that respect, because it was made in 1968, obviously. I mean, there was a little bit of an exception in that at that party, I don't know whether they're holding some party towards the end of the film, and she's in the kitchen with her friends who are of the same age as Rosemary, and they are sympathetic and they're not part of the cult.
Yes,
And
right.
they're saying you've got to go back to Dr. Hill. This other Saperstein sounds like a bit of a whack, a bit of a quack. he's obviously doing the wrong thing. And she does try and go to Dr. Hill, but by then she's suspicious of what's actually happening in the demonic cult. And I don't think Hill really believes her. He pretends he does, but then he calls Dr. Saperstein and Guy and says, "You better come and pick her up."
The women are
And
out
take
of their
take her
depth.
back
I
up.
mean, if it were a modern
Yeah.
movie with modern women's rights and everything and empowerment, those women wouldn't just advise her and then let her make her decision. They would be like, "I'm coming with you to the fucking doctor." That's exactly what
Yeah,
would happen
yeah.
now. And in fact, it doesn't happen. I wish it would happen when I was 10 years old and women really were meek like that. I mean, my mom was meek and mild and afraid of doctors, but in the 70s, I mean, it's like, it's just keeps closing in. So I'll let you handle the amazing
I
tension.
can't wait to see it though. I can't
Oh, I
wait to
thought you
watch
had
this
seen
movie
it. Oh, okay.
again. Oh no, I did when I was 24, but I
Oh,
I
okay.
literally hadn't understood it until I actually, now that you're talking about it, until I've come out of the situation in which I might have, like, not exactly the same situation,
I
Oh.
don't
but
hear
like
any
you know
Satan's
what I mean? But
babies crying back
yeah.
there.
No, 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 no. I haven't delivered any Satan's babies, no. But you know what I mean? But that sort of psychological sort of like triangulation or gaslighting or whatever sort
Yeah,
of
it's what Chuck says,
being I
gaslighting.
was yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
it's a gaslighting tool.
brought up in a family, a dark family that like wasn't my family, you know? So like when I meet people who've actually grew up in families that were like supportive of them and like encouraging and stuff like that, I'm like, you have no idea how lucky
Yeah,
you
I know.
are.
I didn't have that.
You
What you
know?
just described as a fairy
Yeah.
tale in my life. I didn't have that
But
at all.
I think the
Yeah.
casting of Mia Farrow really is what makes that all work because the character of Rosemary is a victim, and I mean, she's a character who has been targeted. She's been obviously raised in a hardcore Catholic guilt environment, and then she's been placed into, so she's been in uh, a submissive mode with that her entire life. She's been in a
Yeah.
submissive mode with her husband. She's in a submissive mode now with everything, with it's like you're talking about like gaslighting. She's also being isolated and she's being disempowered at all corners everywhere she goes. And to get Mia Farrow, who looks like she weighs 80 pounds in this thing, she's
She's an
just
urchin.
yeah,
A
she
slip of
almost
a
looks,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
she looks like almost barely an adult, and and she's trying. It's like you can see in her that she's trying to assert herself, but
Right.
nobody ever
Hmm.
gives that to her. She
Hmm.
tries, she tries, and she gets slapped back every time. And it's just like it's so hard to
It's
watch.
a sad mirror also of her
Yeah.
It
real
is.
life
It
because
is.
during that period she
Yeah.
was married to Frank Sinatra. You couldn't get two more different human beings in a relationship. And from what I understand, he just was old school and beat her and fucked with her, and then later she got with somebody she thought was super sensitive, and you see how that
Oh
turned
boy.
out.
Thing. Yeah, just going. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it mirrors it, metaphorically a lot of her own life in that way.
Kind of
Um,
sad.
Yeah, but on that note, I just also want to add that like it's important, something that I've learned that you do have to kind of have a bit of shadow to be able to deal with other people's shadow, because if she had a bit of shadow, if she had a bit of teeth, like some teeth, she'd be able to fight her way out of it. But because she doesn't have her teeth, she's in that submissive role that Catholicism brings,
To
that
to
she
to
didn't
her,
have that
yeah.
ability.
Well, to her
Yeah, so that's
credit, I
her.
mean, it's pretty much the movie is you and Rosemary. You're just like hanging
yeah,
out with
Mm.
yeah.
Rosemary. You're always in her point of view. Is there a scene from that isn't from her point of view? I can't think of one. Maybe there is. But
There's a few, yeah, but it's rare. It's very few.
so you're
It,
kind of like with her and you see her and she actually is struggling really hard at the end and she has a plan and she keeps talking to the baby. And but
Yeah.
she still doesn't quite know the enormity of it. I mean, she does kind of know, but you know, go ahead, Justin.
She does try and fight back, but she's got no allies, as we've said, no real allies there beside her. And she tries to fight back, but you realize that when she's telling people like Dr. Hill that she is coming across as paranoid. Um, but
Yeah, they get to
yeah,
Dr. Hill, I think. Either Dr.
they
Hill,
do get to him. I don't think
oh yeah,
he
oh
truly
yeah,
believed her. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
he
yeah,
was very dismissive all of a sudden.
Yep.
of her.
Yeah, maybe it's sort of a hero worship of Saperstein because he sort of when he found out that it was Dr. Saperstein, he said, "Oh,
Yes.
Doctor Albert Saperstein," and
Well, you
yeah,
get back
that's right.
into that power thing, like a power and authority. It's like we talked about in Candyman. No one believes Helen through the whole movie. And who are they? The cops, all these authorities. They don't believe her. They don't help her. And you're supposed to respect their opinion over the victim. And yeah, in a way that is like this because the cult is really, I mean, the cult is really they're inculcated in society. They've infiltrated society. So they obviously know these rich people, these wealthy people, and they can pull these strings, and it's kind of
And
sad.
the film goes 360 degrees because she's then taken Rosemary back to her apartment after Hill basically betrays her, and but then she manages to give them the slip in the hallway, and she charges into her apartment, locks the door before Guy can stop her and Saperstein. And then she's sort of wondering what to do and who to call. And then you see in the background a couple of people sort of tiptoeing. Looks quite comical actually, but they're tiptoeing through the lounge, trying to sneak up on poor old Rosemary. And you're thinking, how the hell did they get into the apartment? And then it turns out, of course, that
Yeah.
well, she is then uh, I think then is sort of captured by the coven and she goes into labour. This is when she initially has the baby. She goes into labour at that time. Um, and then that she's told that the baby later on she's told that the baby has died and she doesn't believe it. She says, "No, you've taken the baby," because she's come to realise that maybe the coven or the occult group wants the baby for their own purposes. So she never really believes that the baby was stillborn and believes it was taken from her with the cooperation of Guy, who's working with them. And then when she's recovering at home, she does find out that when she goes into the linen cupboard, the closet, there's a light little a hole of light at the back of the closet. She takes some shelves out and she peeks through the hole and she can see the hallway inside the Castanets apartment. And she suddenly realizes there's a false door at the back of the closet. And this is how they've been able to access her apartment
Mhm.
through an alternative means.
Spooky. Ah,
It's spooky. So and apparently that building, that would be possible to do that if you go behind the closets of these apartments. I was reading up on Wiki yesterday about this.
Hmm.
But anyway, she goes in and she busts them while they're having sort of a get together. The cult guys there and the Castanets apartment and various other people who've been helping her out, so to speak.
They're all
Um,
there.
Saperstein is there. They're all there and they're shocked to see her, and they realise that she's worked out that there's a false back of the closet. But
well done.
the spooky bit at the end of the film is she says, "Why does the baby have these eyes?" And you never actually see the baby in its crib. Um, she goes, "Because Guy doesn't have those eyes." And Mr. Roman Castanet then says, "Well, Guy's not the father; Satan is the father." And this is when they all kind of confess to who and what they are, and that they're devil worshippers.
Well, they
But
they
at
don't
the
just
very end of the
confess; they have a party.
Oh
To me,
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's up to you. If you don't say it, I will. The key line in the whole movie, the year is one. It's
Yeah.
like that's it.
yeah, yeah,
That's
Satan's
that's
Black
child
right.
is here.
Christmas.
It's
Yeah.
like we're not fucking around anymore. The year is
But
one.
Oh God, the
but
year is
unlike a
one.
lot of contemporary, and even The Exorcist, which is not that contemporary, but demon films, there's no sort of positive ending in this film because you then have Rosemary looking at the baby in the crib, and you can see her maternal instincts are starting to come through over the top of everything else
Hmm.
because she is a mother, and she is the mother of this child. And at the encouragement of Mr. Castanet, she's you're looking over the baby and rocking the crib. So the film then ends, and you're wondering whether, in fact, as it's suggested, that Rosemary will also become a believer of this cult.
I don't
Um,
think that. I think she'll stay with her son just because it's her son. I don't
Yeah.
think they'll break
Yeah.
her. That's just my theory. And as far as that movie sequel that we talked about from the 70s, the beginning of it is very solid. She runs away from the cult and she's got the baby, and Patty Duke is playing the character instead of Mia Farrow. And it's just when they flash forward some years and she's lost track of him and it gets into something else. I mean, it could have been good, but I mean, it's obviously set in the future. If Andrew's like born in 1968, TV movies 1976, and before you know it, he's like a guy in a band, dressed like David Bowie or something. So as Stephen McCaddy, so it's like place in the 90s. That's why Levin wrote his own book, though. I that's very divisive. Some people say Levin's solution to his own quandary sucked too. Some people thought it was brilliant. I don't know. I haven't read it, but it was a great book, and it does have that same feeling of, I thought, of paranoia.
Hey, Henry,
Yeah.
can I just say, I remember when they first showed this on TV,
Mm-hmm.
and of course they edited some of the nudity, some of the sex stuff out, although I don't know how heavy that really was.
Not a lot.
They got so many people calling, writing, complaining that they had cut the ending because they remember going to the movie theater and seeing the baby's eyes or his
Yeah.
hoofs or his little pointy horns. And they why did you cut that out? I was like saying, get ready here, you're going to see the eyes, and they didn't see it. And it's go, well, there's the power of Polanski. He's a son of a bitch, but great filmmaker. He made people believe they saw a lot more than they did.
Yeah, my mom said she thought they showed his eyes in the theater. She didn't see it in the theater. I saw it for the first time. My whole family saw it for the first time together when I was like 7 or 8, I guess. We saw it a few years before The Exorcist. It didn't bother me nearly as much as The Exorcist. I mean, it did freak me out, but it didn't, since it didn't have any gore and it wasn't like, too overt. I found it interesting. But
It worked on a number of levels, but I didn't find it nearly as scary as, say, The Exorcist. But
oh no,
it's more of a cult a film
Yeah.
about
it's a thriller.
being
It's
cult.
like a
Yeah, I would call it a horror movie. I just wouldn't say
I
it's a
call it a horror
scary movie. Because there's an impending doom through the entire thing. That's a hallmark of a horror theme in literature. And so there's this sense that she cannot escape what's coming. So, I mean, I think, yeah, it's a horror film. It's just not a scary one. It's an unsettling one. It's a disturbing one, but it's not a scary horror movie. It
It's a
should not scare
psychological
you.
horror.
Yeah, yeah.
Psychological horror.
So, but it definitely falls into the horror category, on a number of levels. Yeah.
It's kind of one of those movies that I like to see, that you have that feeling of dread through the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's going to
Yeah.
happen next. And we talked about this on the show last Halloween about what is horror. And
Yeah.
there are certain movies, The Cook,
As
the
opposed
Thief,
to
His
jump
Wife, and Her
scares.
Lover made me feel that way. And so did
Yeah.
Cannibal Holocaust, and so did some other movies. Like, oh my God, what's around the corner can only get worse. And Rosemary's Baby is pretty fatalistic. It kind of is what it is.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, she's not going to escape. You just know it.
yeah.
There's no way that this is going to ever come out with a Hollywood ending, and it didn't. And I think brilliantly left it the way it did, where we don't see anything
Mm-hmm.
from the baby, because, as Bill mentioned, people saw it anyway, which is exactly what a filmmaker would want to have happen. They
Absolutely.
saw it and they remember it as seeing it, but it isn't there. It's all in their imagination.
Mm-hmm. Well
Yeah,
said.
that's good, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
It's a bit like Jewel, where you never actually see the maniacal truck driver. You just see his winkle kicker boots kicking the tires.
Yeah.
You never actually see him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a real art to knowing when it's going to be best if I don't show something.
You can really trick audiences.
Like Reanimator, like we were saying about the head.
Oh, that one scene, yeah.
That one scene in Reanimator.
But like, you grew up hearing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and you don't see it, and everyone swears to use gore, and there's no gore in the movie.
Yeah.
There's one splash of blood when Franklin is sawed. So, spoiler, sorry. I know. I hope everyone's seen it. There's one splash of blood, and then there's a whole lot of skeletons, and but there's no gore ever in the whole movie. I mean, yeah, he hits the guy in the head pretty hard, but you don't see like his brains coming out or anything. And so it's like, people are like, man, it's so gory. And I'm like, but then part two really was really gross. But anyway, go ahead, Justin. You have any other thoughts on this?
Well, not really, other than say I want to shout out to Dwayne and thank you to him again for sending me the film and putting it in
Thanks,
the Dropbox
Dwayne.
link. Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. As he's done with a few other films. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed the film. But it was a hard watch. It was a bit depressing as a film, as we've discussed.
Right.
But it's certainly worth watching because I'd heard a lot about the film and never actually seen it until yesterday.
It's great
But
to hear your
yeah, that's it.
perspective.
Mm.
Yeah, Rosemary's Baby is just one. It's one of my all-time favorite horror classics.
Yeah,
I revisit it often. I just watched it again last year. You can't go wrong with it. It's the only Polanski movie I still watch. Yeah.
One little bit of trivia. This was produced by William Castle,
yeah.
the classic exploitation filmmaker, famous for all his gimmicks. Skeletons floating in the air, and uh, the Tingler had Percepto, just all kinds of crazy things. He read this book and saw the potential, bought it to make it himself, but he needed a much bigger budget than he was used to working with, and the studios wanted. They also probably were kicking themselves for not getting it earlier. They knew that they needed a big name, so he was talked
Yeah.
into having Polanski do it, and I'm sure the return on his investment was probably worth the pain of not getting to make the movie himself.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Well, I think this has been good. I'm glad that we're all familiar with this. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and then we will return shortly with another episode talking all about demons, devils, black magic, and
And let's talk to those folks out there watching this. Please remember to give us the big thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends about us, do whatever it is that all these YouTubes and everything have there to express your joy. Because just it'll encourage us to keep on doing this. And look at this, you got a whole bunch of us off the streets on Friday night when we could be out causing a ruckus and a hootenanny and a brouhaha and all kinds of mischief. But
we're a
instead,
bunch
we're
of
here talking
hooligans.
about a bunch of hooligans. And hooligans and mulligans. Oh my God. It's just
Bunch of
yeah. Ne'er-do-wells, scalawags.
engaging in all kinds of skullduggery.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh well,
Ooh, nice
skullduggery.
words.
Walking down the street like the Jets from West Side Story and the other gangs would just like beat us up. So
Yeah.
please encourage us to keep doing this.
Yes.
And thank
Drop a
you for your
like on the
patience.
video, and
We can't afford to keep
Subscribe.
getting in these gang fights.
Yeah,
That's right.
Indeed.
yeah. We don't have a guy like
Wearing out
Cyrus.
our switchblades.
Yeah. Switchblades and witchblades, both. So,
Yeah.
Join up, guys. Keep us off the street. Keep us out of jail.
all right. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Desires, breathing in fire, my people blaze, fueling my last days. No reason